the golden cage. Why getting what you want won't save your soul's Zen wisdom. In this very loop of the earth, an identical human phenomenon is unfolding across continents. An individual is awakening in the quiet darkness of the morning, Sato-fronted by a profoundly familiar somatic sensation. It manifests as a subtle, unyielding pressure resting directly behind the breastbone, a quiet, internal realization that despite every external milestone they have checked off, every professional summit they have scaled, and every comfort they have meticulously gathered, an essential dimension of their existence remains completely unmapped. It is the peculiar, unsettling vacuum that routinely colonizes the psyche immediately after a long-cherished goal has been fully realized. It is the existential baseline that suggests there must be an entirely separate way of being alive, something fundamentally deeper than the next accumulation of capital, the next sensory gratification, or the next social marker. You have encountered the architecture of this void within your own life cycle, haven't you? It is the whisper that populates the quiet margins of your busiest days, asking a single question that the intellect continuously attempts to drown out with noise. If you are capable of doing so, allow your physical frame to settle into a space of absolute comfort and security. Dim the artificial lights surrounding you. Wrap your frame in the protection of a soft blanket and step away from the relentless velocity of your daily requirements. What we are preparing to explore together throughout this night is not a collection of academic theories or a set of rigid doctrines to be stored within your memory. It is a direct, living orientation designed to return your awareness to the home it has been hunting for since the very beginning of its journey. 2,500 years ago, a young individual who possessed the absolute pinnacle of worldly insulation discovered precisely why 99% of human beings look for peace in the exact dimensions where it can never survive. His systematic investigation and the revolutionary framework that emerged from his awakening holds the capacity to completely alter your understanding of why you are here on this earth, the apex of the worldly mountain, the mirage of having it all. There is an iconic cultural artifact from our modern era that perfectly exposes the mechanics of this internal dilemma. A highly celebrated performance artist, standing before a global audience while surrounded by the absolute fulfillment of every conventional human fantasy, looked directly into a lens and shared an insight that shattered the modern paradigm of success. He stated his sincere wish that every human being could achieve absolute wealth, universal fame, and the realization of their most extravagant dreams, simply so they could witness for themselves that these external acquisitions are entirely incapable of providing the answer to our deepest eternal longing. If you allow your system to feel into the texture of that statement, you perceive the profound empathy hidden within its delivery. Here is an individual who climbed the exact mountain that millions of humans are currently exhausting their life cycles, attempting to scale the mountain of celebrity, validation, material sovereignty, and absolute visibility, only to discover that the view from the summit did not touch the unconditioned peace his heart was actually seeking. This discovery is not unique to our contemporary landscape. It is a cross-cultural, timeless pattern that repeats whenever human intelligence reaches its absolute peak of external manifestation. Consider the historical reality of the mathematical genius who decoded the invisible laws governing the motion of the celestial bodies, reshaping our entire understanding of the cosmos. During his final days on this earth, surrounded by the absolute reverence of the global scientific community, he looked back upon his monumental intellectual achievements and compared his life to nothing more than a small child playing on a pebble-strewn beach, occasionally finding a smoother stone or a prettier shell, while the vast, unmeasured ocean of ultimate truth lay completely undiscovered before his awareness. Despite rewriting the very rules of human reason, an immense, foundational space within his consciousness remained entirely unfulfilled. There is something deeply moving and universal about this structural limitation of the mind. Think of the legendary polymath whose hands gave humanity the most analyzed visage in the history of art, and whose intellect drafted detailed schematics for mechanical flight centuries before the industrial capacity to build them had even crossed the human imagination. On his deathbed, surrounded by the patrons of empires, he whispered in a state of quiet grief that his life's work had failed to achieve the level of quality and ultimate significance it should have reached. The realization of historic genius could not quiet the internal voice that longed for something prior to expression. Similarly, the most visible musical performer of the modern era, an individual who broke every record of commercial consumption imaginable, confessed in a rare window of absolute vulnerability that he was completely unable to find satisfaction in any achievement, describing his internal state as a permanent condition of restlessness where the next project was required to be exponentially greater, simply to keep his despair at bay. Even when his creative output dominated the global charts, an internal friction was continuously gnawing at his system. Allow your system to take a long, slow breath right now, because if you are resting within this space, your awareness likely recognizes the emotional baseline of these histories. You do not feel this way because you are inherently ungrateful, broken, or missing a psychological component that everyone else seems to possess. You feel this way because your consciousness is operating with absolute health, beautifully and completely human. You can likely recall the exact parameters of the last time you achieved a milestone you had spent months of your life force chasing after, that specific professional advancement, that significant material acquisition, or that curated experiential transition you had constructed within your imagination as the definitive gateway to your happiness. There was a genuine spike of elation when the boundary was crossed, a real interval of internal relief where your mind whispered, "Yes, we have finally arrived." But measure honestly the lifespan of that specific emotional state before the familiar undercurrent of restlessness returned to colonize your consciousness. For the vast majority of our species, that interval of peace is heartbreakingly brief, lasting a few days, perhaps a few weeks, before the focus of our attention automatically shifts toward the next horizon, the next milestone, the next marker that promises to be different this time. It is like being locked into a subtle automated treadmill, investing an immense amount of energy and labor, yet remaining in the exact same emotional coordinates. We must understand, with the deepest possible compassion, that this repetitive cycle is never a flaw in your personal character. It is not evidence that you are failing at your life, or that you are not trying hard enough to be content. It is the most natural systemic mechanism in the world, and it touches every single heart that functions on this earth. Those individuals who present images of absolute fulfillment on digital networks experience the exact same 3 a.m. questions that populate your awareness. Your colleagues who appear to navigate their existences with complete clarity carry the same tender, unnamed longing for a home they cannot physically locate. We are all hunting for the exact same reality, that foundational sense of being truly at peace, entirely home within our own lives. But here is where our exploration enters a remarkably fascinating territory and insight that may sound entirely counterintuitive to your conditioning initially, but stay completely present for its delivery. What if the primary function of getting what you want was never structurally engineered to give you what you are actually seeking? What if we have been systematically demanding our external achievements to execute a task they were never designed to perform? It is identical to placing a magnificent piece of fine art before a hungry individual and demanding that the painting cook a nutritious dinner. The artwork is genuinely beautiful, valuable, and worthy of deep appreciation, but it does not possess the structural capacity to serve as a chef. Our worldly successes are authentically wonderful milestones, but they are entirely incapable of serving as the source of an unconditioned, lasting peace. This predictable pattern of achievement, followed by immediate internal desertification, appears across every human culture, every historical epoch, and every tier of our social hierarchy. It governs the internal experience of the high-level corporate executive and the struggling street artist alike. It touches the global icon and the quiet neighbor next door. All of them carry the exact same unvoiced inquiry within their hearts, discovering through their unique paths that external circumstances, no matter how flawlessly they are arranged, can never fill that spacious interior dimension that longs for a reality that is unconditioned by circumstance. So what is it that we are actually hunting for beneath all this movement? What is that quiet internal voice truly requesting when it whispers into your night? Is this all there is to my life? And why is this specific architecture of longing so deeply woven into the very fabric of the human experience? The architecture of the beautiful trap. There is an immense, tender love hidden within the way we are socialized by our communities, isn't there? From the earliest stages of our cognitive development, the world wraps our awareness in a beautifully structured narrative filled with hope and promise. We are told by well-meaning parents who want to protect our lives, and by dedicated educators who believe in our absolute potential, that if we just invest our energy into our education, follow our creative dreams, and construct the specific life we imagine, our happiness will manifest as a natural consequence. Every human culture whispers this exact same gentle promise to its children, that success will yield ultimate satisfaction, that accomplishment will induce a permanent state of joy, and that the correct combination of external experiences and material markers will eventually unlock that golden door to a lasting fulfillment. Even our foundational legal documents declare the pursuit of happiness to be an inherent, fundamental human right. It is a beautiful concept, an entire civilization organized around the premise that happiness is not merely an economical occurrence but an asset we should actively chase across the earth. There is a genuine, undeniable wisdom operational within this conventional story. The setting of goals provides our focus with a clear trajectory. The realization of achievements delivers authentic intervals of validation, and the act of constructing something of utility does touch the heart. But here is the precise location where an exceptionally well-intentioned cultural narrative constructs the most loving trap imaginable for our awareness. We begin to treat happiness not as a spontaneous, natural byproduct of living our lives with presence, but as the primary destination itself. Every daily decision gets automatically filtered through a binary question. Will this action make me happy? Every life choice becomes a calculated piece of a grand strategy designed to maximize personal joy and minimize any form of discomfort. It sounds remarkably reasonable, doesn't it? It appears entirely logical and deeply caring toward our own well-being. But a highly curious psychological mechanism is activated the moment we transform happiness into our central objective. It becomes identical to the act of lying in your bed and aggressively commanding your brain to fall asleep immediately through an effort of willpower. The harder you fight to achieve the state, the more elusive the state becomes. You have likely experienced the mechanics of this paradox when planning an exceptionally special event in your life. The more internal pressure you place upon that specific evening to be absolutely perfect, the more a subtle undercurrent of anxiety creeps into the margins of your awareness, centered entirely around whether the reality of the experience will live up to the massive weight of your expectations. This dynamic creates what modern psychologists call the happiness paradox. The very act of chasing happiness as your primary existential goal can function as the exact mechanism that prevents you from experiencing it. When your awareness is continuously measuring its own emotional temperature, constantly asking itself, "Am I happy yet? Am I sufficiently joyful in this moment? How about right now?" You create a subtle but remarkably persistent internal message, suggesting that something is fundamentally wrong with your current unmediated experience. Think back honestly to the last time you felt a genuine, deep sense of contentment on this earth. The probability is immense that you were not thinking about the concept of happiness at all. Perhaps you were completely absorbed in a deep conversation with someone you love, or entirely lost in a creative task that demanded your total engagement, or simply resting in an absolute presence with a slow sunset over the water. Happiness snuck up on your awareness, precisely because you were not looking for its arrival. Our well-meaning modern culture amplifies this psychological trap in 1,000 different directions. Commercial advertisements promise that the purchase of a specific vehicle or the acquisition of a particular home will finally deliver the security you crave. Self-help frameworks offer linear formulas for joy, and even our casual social check-ins revolve around what is making us happy or unhappy. We have constructed an entire global economy organized around the premise that peace is a commodity we can acquire, achieve, or optimize our way into. But see the deep tenderness hidden within this collective situation. Nobody set out to construct a trap for your heart. Every parent wanting their child to be happy. Every teacher encouraging students to pursue their bliss. And every companion offering advice regarding the location of joy. All of this originates from a space of genuine love. We have all been doing our absolute best with the most beautiful intentions. The parameters of the trap become visible only when we observe that the most genuinely peaceful individuals we encounter throughout our lives are almost never the ones who are chasing happiness with the greatest intensity. They are typically the individuals who have become completely absorbed in something larger than their personal preservation, caring for the vulnerability of others, bringing a meaningful creation into form, or dedicating their focus to a purpose that transcends their personal pleasure. Their peace appears to flow naturally from an uncalculated engagement with reality, not from the deliberate pursuit of an emotional state. What if we have been systematically asking life to hand us something it was never structurally designed to provide? What if happiness, like a rainbow appearing in a mist, is an epiphenomenon, something that manifests spontaneously when conditions are precisely balanced, but vanishes into thin air the very moment we attempt to grasp it tightly? What if we have become so completely obsessed with the architecture of the destination that we have forgotten how to simply walk the path with open hands? This does not mean that joy is bad, or that pleasant experiences do not matter to the soul. It signifies something far more liberating for your awareness tonight. It suggests that we may be climbing a beautiful ladder with an immense sincerity and a massive investment of effort. But perhaps that ladder is currently leaning against a wall that can only take our consciousness so far. Long ago, a young prince found himself trapped in this exact same beautiful gilded enclosure. He possessed everything the wall of external success could ever offer a human life, and his discovery of an entirely separate wall, gentle, revolutionary, and available to your awareness in this very dark room, alters everything, but in the softest way imaginable. The leaking basin shifting, the inquiry, there is a magnificent beauty operational within the human spirit, isn't there? For thousands of years, across every geographical territory and every shifting civilization, we have been asking the exact same heartfelt question. How can I become happier? It is an entirely natural, loving inquiry to direct toward existence. Of course we want to feel comfort in our bodies. Of course we want joy to flood our rooms. Of course we want our brief life cycles to feel bright, meaningful, and secure. But what if and allow your awareness to hold this as a gentle possibility tonight? What if this specific question, as sincere and honest as it is, has been systematically directing our journey down a path that can never quite deliver us to the home we are seeking? Imagine an individual standing beside a large wooden basin, trying desperately to fill it to the brim with water. They pour bucket after bucket into the container, working with an immense diligence, their muscles aching from the labor, growing increasingly frustrated that the water level never seems to stay at the top. They try utilizing different varieties of water. They try pouring. With an accelerated velocity, they buy larger and more elaborate buckets. Yet somehow, the baseline satisfaction of a full container never lasts. The water level always drops back down into emptiness. Now imagine an old guide walking past the scene, pausing to observe the frantic labor, and gently pointing out a structural feature of the container. There is a permanent hole built into the very bottom of your basin. In an instant of clear seeing, everything changes for the worker. The problem was never the quality of the water, or the velocity of the pouring technique, or a lack of physical effort on their part. The problem lay entirely in the act of trying to fill a vessel that was structurally designed to leak its contents. This is the exact mechanic that is activated when we ask our lives, how can I become happier? We are essentially trying to pour more and more external experiences, more accolades, more material assets, and more pleasant sensations into our existence, hoping they will eventually create a state of permanent, stable fulfillment, and they do work temporarily. The water rises briefly within the basin, providing a real moment of satisfaction before draining out into the void once more. But see the deep tenderness hidden within this realization. The structural leak at the bottom of your internal basin is never a personal failure, a character defect, or a psychological flaw within your being. It is actually something infinitely more beautiful and profound. It is the precise manner in which consciousness itself is designed to operate constantly in motion, continuously transitioning, entirely unable to hold on to any passing experience permanently. Every single moment of joy must naturally give way to the next emerging moment. Every external achievement, no matter how historic or magnificent, becomes part of your historical past rather than your immediate present. Every pleasant sensation, every successful transaction, and every beautiful experience flows through your field of awareness, like clean water through that gentle leak. This is not a malfunction within the machinery of your human design, it is its primary feature. So what would occur if we made the conscious choice to alter our central inquiry entirely? Instead of asking the world, how can I acquire more happiness? What if we asked, how can I find an unconditioned peace with the natural flow of my life, instead of asking, how can I secure more of what my mind wants? What if we asked, how can I understand the underlying mechanics that are driving this constant wanting? This shift is never about surrendering your passion for life, or becoming passive, cold, or indifferent to the beauty of the world. It is about an orientation far more radical and freeing for your spirit. It is about discovering that the unconditioned peace you have been hunting for, through continuous external alteration, might be fully available to your awareness right here, right now, simply by changing your internal relationship to the experiences you are already having. Think back to those rare moments in your history when you felt a deep, absolute sense of internal peace. Often, they were not moments defined by intense sensory pleasure or historic personal achievement. They were moments of absolute presence, watching a light mist move through the trees, holding the hand of someone you love in silence, or feeling entirely okay with exactly what was unfolding in that square foot of existence. In those specific windows of time, you were not demanding that the basin hold on to its water permanently. You were simply appreciating the presence of the water while it was passing through your hands. This shift in your foundational questioning redefines the entire terrain of your life. Instead of spending your limited days trying to frantically rearrange your external circumstances to force them to match your desires, you begin to investigate the internal conditions that generate your restlessness. Instead of adding more water to an overflowing basin, you develop a deep, loving curiosity regarding the nature of the leak itself. And within this space, your path becomes intensely practical. When you stop asking, how can I make this moment happier? And begin to ask, what is this immediate dissatisfaction trying to reveal to my awareness? You suddenly gain direct access to answers that actually work, not temporary psychological band-aids that require continuous maintenance, but genuine shifts in baseline understanding that alter how you relate to everything in the universe. The question transforms into, what is the exact component within my identity that currently feels incomplete? What if this deep, persistent longing is indicating a reality far more profound than any external experience could ever provide? What if I do not need to alter a single feature of my current self to be intrinsically okay in this darkness? These are not abstract philosophical puzzles you must resolve with your analytical intellect tonight. They are direct invitations to step into a completely different mode of being present with whatever arises in your consciousness. They point your awareness toward a form of fulfillment that never depends on securing specific outcomes or maintaining particular emotional states. When you shift your orientation from trying to fill the leaking basin to understanding the nature of the leak itself, your entire life transforms, not because you have discovered a clever new answer, but because you have finally realized you are living inside a completely separate question, the tested map, the lineage of the seeker. You might naturally be wondering why we are turning our attention toward a narrative that took place 2,500 years ago, when we are dealing with such modern, hyper-accelerated challenges. Why direct our focus backward in time when we have access to contemporary psychological research, neuroscientific data, and cutting-edge approaches to human well-being? It is an entirely fair and valid question to ask, and there is a great beauty in exploring its answer. Here is what is truly remarkable regarding the human heart. The deepest, most foundational questions we face have not altered an ounce across millennia. The exact same systemic restlessness that visits your awareness at 3 o'clock in the morning touched human beings sleeping in ancient Greece, in medieval Europe, and in Renaissance Italy. The same quiet internal voice asking, "Is this all there is to my life?" has whispered to human awareness across every culture, every language, and every historical epoch. We possess an incredible infrastructure of technology today, unprecedented material comfort, instant access to information, and luxuries that ancient rulers could not have even conceptualized within their dreams. Yet, somehow, the fundamental human experience of an interior longing for something prior to form remains precisely identical. Our tools for securing comfort have evolved with immense velocity, but the actual nature of human discontentment and our relationship to it follows patterns that are timelessly human. What makes ancient wisdom so exceptionally precious to our modern landscape is not the mere fact of its age, but the reality that it has been continuously tested across time. When an insight survives across thousands of years, across completely diverse cultures, and through the rise and fall of entire civilizations, it indicates that the truth within it speaks directly to an unchanging dimension of the human experience. These maps were refined not within short-term laboratory studies, but within the deep laboratory of human hearts navigating reality. And if you are resting within this quiet darkness right now, wherever your physical frame is located in the world, whether you are walking through the mechanical noise of a modern city, sitting in a quiet room, or lying down in total stillness, you are an active part of an ancient, noble lineage of seekers. You are part of that community of humans who have looked beneath the surface attractions of life and recognized that there must be a reality that goes deeper. You are never broken for feeling this internal space. You are not ungrateful, damaged, or missing a critical component that everyone else has figured out. You are simply awake enough to note that the conventional answers of our socialization, as well-meaning as they are, can never satisfy the deepest dimensions of your awareness. And that specific awakeness, that internal willingness to keep questioning the narrative, is actually a profound form of wisdom operating within your system. What we are preparing to step into together is a living, functional discovery that continues to transform human lives today. The insights we are approaching have been continuously verified through the direct, lived experience of millions of individuals who discovered a genuine, unconditioned peace by walking this exact path of inquiry. The narrative we are entering is not about a supernatural entity or a superhuman character who achieved an impossible status. It is about a human being who faced the exact same fundamental existential questions that populate your life, who simply possessed the absolute advantages of a highly specific environment to investigate them to their logical conclusion. The revolutionary framework that emerged from his systematic investigation was never mystical or otherworldly. It was an intensely clear, practical seeing of how psychological suffering is constructed by the mind, and therefore, how it can be brought to an absolute end. It was practical wisdom operating under the mask of spiritual awakening. What makes this ancient discovery so critically relevant to your life tonight is that it addresses the exact operational mechanism. We have been exploring together the basin with the structural leak, the beautiful trap of chasing an emotional destination, and the question we have been asking completely wrong. All of this finds its resolution under a tree in ancient India, and once you see the mechanism clearly, the relief is absolute. The kingdom of total insulation, the golden enclosure. Imagine, if your awareness can enter the space, a life where every single desire is completely and perfectly fulfilled the exact microsecond it arises within your thoughts, not at some point in the future, not after months of hard labor, and not if you happen to secure good fortune, but immediately, effortlessly, and flawlessly. This was the specific world that the young prince, Siddhartha, was born into within a peaceful kingdom at the base of the mountains. His father, driven by an intense desire to protect his son from the raw friction of existence, had constructed what might be the most elaborate, hyper-curated paradise ever engineered for a single human being. The prince possessed 3 distinct palaces, constructed specifically for each season of the year, each one architectural masterpiece designed to maximize physical comfort and aesthetic delight. Surrounding these structures were expansive gardens that bloomed in a state of eternal spring, filled with rare flora brought from every known corner of the world. Musicians of the highest caliber occupied the corridors day and night, ensuring that every movement of his life was accompanied by a perfect, soothing harmonic progression. The most exquisite foods were prepared by master chefs who utilized rare delicacies brought across vast deserts and oceans, by traders who journeyed just to serve the prince's private table. Woven silks of absolute softness draped every single surface, and fine gems that caught and scattered the sunlight like captured rainbows adorned every room. But his insulation extended far beyond pure material luxury. Siddhartha was surrounded exclusively by the most beautiful, intelligent, and highly accomplished individuals of his generation, poets who could transform language into direct emotion, dancers whose physical movements appeared to defy the laws of gravity, and scholars who could discuss philosophy with a brilliant clarity. Every conversation he held was stimulating, every human encounter was delightful, and every relationship was entirely harmonious. His father had systematically ensured that nothing unpleasant, vulnerable, or raw could ever cross the perimeter of the palace walls. There was absolutely no permission for sickness, poverty, conflict, or decay to enter his field of vision. If a single flower began to show signs of wilting in the vast gardens, it was quietly removed and replaced by attendants long before the prince could perceive the transition. If an employee showed the natural signs of aging, they were gently reassigned to duties outside the external walls of the kingdom. This was the absolute realization of the ultimate human fantasy life. Siddhartha possessed everything that modern marketing promises will deliver happiness to your life. He held everything that contemporary society suggests is the ideal existence. He held unlimited wealth, flawless physical health, continuous high-level entertainment, deeply loving relationships, creative freedom, and absolute structural security. Yet, beneath all this perfection, a subtle undercurrent was beginning to stir within his heart. Can you perceive the strange, quiet sadness hidden within that space? Here was a human being living the absolute dream of our species, and yet in the quiet intervals between pleasures, an unvoiced restlessness began to colonize his awareness. It was not that the pleasures of his life were artificial or shallow. The music was genuinely magnificent, the food was authentically delicious, and the relationships around him were filled with a real affection. But there was something about the very perfection of his insulation that felt fundamentally incomplete, resembling the experience of living inside a gorgeous painting, rather than experiencing the raw texture of real life. Siddhartha began to notice features of existence that no one else seemed to know, how the most intense pleasure, once it reached its peak, would naturally fade out, leaving behind a subtle demand for the next experience, how the most engaging conversation eventually concluded, leaving a quiet void in the room, and how the continuous fulfillment of his desires was entirely failing to fulfill the dimension of his consciousness that was generating the desires in the first place. He began to feel as if he were living inside the most beautiful golden cage ever constructed by human hands. Every bar was forged of solid gold, every lock was encrusted with precious diamonds, and every corner was filled with delight, but it remained structurally a cage. The very perfection that was engineered to guarantee his happiness was functioning as an absolute barrier to understanding what true peace actually was. There is something deeply poignant about this situation, isn't there? He had won the ultimate lottery of human existence, and he was beginning to suspect that the lottery itself was organized around a fundamental error regarding what a human being actually requires to feel complete. Late at night, when the divine music had finally ceased, when the courtiers had retired to their quarters, and the massive palaces settled into their perfumed silence, Siddhartha would lie awake, shadow-fronted by questions that all the luxury in the world could not answer. Is this repetitive loop truly the absolute purpose of being alive? Is the continuous gratification of sensory desire the highest reality a human being can experience? Why does the fulfillment of every want simply generate a fresh want within my mind? His father noted the subtle shift in his son's demeanor and attempted to resolve the internal dilemma the only way his conditioning permitted, by adding more variables of pleasure, more distractions, and more elaborate entertainment to his days. He brought in more beautiful companions, more exotic feasts, and more spectacular festivities. But it was identical to the act of trying to cure an intense thirst by drinking salt water. The more Siddhartha drank from the fountain of palace pleasure, the thirstier his consciousness became for a reality he could not yet name. The rupture of the illusion, the four sights. As the prince approached his late 20s, the internal restlessness achieved a velocity that could no longer be pacified by luxury. An intense curiosity demanded answers that could not be found within the curated perimeters of his father's palaces. He felt an absolute compulsion to understand what real existence was like outside the golden bubble of his insulation. What were human beings experiencing beyond the walls? Was there a core dimension of the human journey that all this comfort was actively preventing him from seeing? One morning he commanded his trusted charioteer, Channa, to prepare his vehicle for a journey into the streets of the surrounding city. His father had explicitly forbidden such an excursion, but an urge deeper than social duty was driving the prince now. He needed to see reality as it actually was, unmediated by curation. As the chariot moved through the gates and entered the public quarters of the city, Siddhartha was shadow-fronted by the first sight that stopped his breath completely. He perceived an elderly man walking along the path, not an individual who was aging with a manicured comfort, but a human body that carried the absolute, unmitigated weight of years. The man's frame was severely bent toward the earth. His movements were slow and accompanied by physical strain, and his skin was deeply grooved by decades of exposure to the elements. Siddhartha had never witnessed the structural reality of physical decay within his palace of eternal youth. What has transpired to alter this person's physical frame? The prince inquired of Channa, his voice reflecting a profound, genuine confusion. The charioteer, realizing that the prince's insulated existence had hidden the most basic laws of biology from his awareness, replied gently, "This is old age, my lord. This is the natural trajectory that awaits all human bodies as the years pass through their systems. Everyone is subject to this law: the laborers, the wealthy nobles, you and me. This is how all our physical narratives conclude if we live long enough on this earth." Something cracked wide open within Siddhartha's chest. All the beautiful, vibrant individuals who populated his palaces, all the graceful dancers and brilliant intellectuals, absolutely every one of them would one day bend, slow down, and fade into this exact configuration of decay. How had this fundamental truth of existence been kept from his awareness? They continued their movement through the city streets, but the prince's mind was reeling from the shock. If physical decay was a universal law, what other dimensions of reality had been hidden from his understanding? As if the universe were determined to complete his education in a single afternoon, they encountered the second sighted individual lying by the side of the street, their frame racked by an intense sickness. The person was shivering with fever, crying out in physical agony, their features transformed by suffering into something barely recognizable as human. Siddhartha had never witnessed the reality of acute disease within his sanitized world. "What specific affliction has taken hold of this person?" he asked, though a deeper layer of his intuition already understood that the response would dismantle another piece of his protected reality. "This is sickness, my lord," Channa explained with a growing sadness. "Physical disease can strike any human system at any given moment without warning. The body, no matter how carefully it is nourished or how beautiful its form, remains inherently vulnerable to become a source of immense suffering. This too is an inescapable part of our baseline human condition." Now the prince understood with absolute clarity why his palace had felt like an invisible casino, because it restricted his physical movements, but because it restricted his capacity to comprehend reality. How could he make sense of his own existence if he remained entirely ignorant of the basic laws that all human life operated under? How could he find an authentic meaning in pleasures that were constructed entirely upon the continuous denial of these fundamental conditions? But his education was not yet complete. The chariot rounded a commercial corner, and the third sight appeared before his awareness, a solemn funeral procession, moving slowly through the street, carrying a human body wrapped in cloth toward the cremation grounds. He witnessed the unmitigated grief of the family members, the absolute finality of the cold form, and the unmistakable, heavy presence of death itself. Siddhartha had never once witnessed the reality of a human cessation. "Does this specific condition happen to every living being?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Everyone, my lord," Channa replied softly. "No human being has ever discovered a way to escape this absolute conclusion. Old age, physical sickness, and absolute death, these are what the Buddha would later define as the primary forms of dukkha, the inherent vulnerability that touches every single human life on this earth. No amount of material wealth, no tier of social status, and no degree of sensory pleasure can ultimately protect a single human system from encountering these realities." Siddhartha felt as if the entire conceptual foundation of his world had disintegrated into dust. Everything within his palace, the eternal spring, the continuous celebrations, and the carefully maintained perfections, suddenly appeared as an elaborate, desperate act of denial. How could he possibly return to live within a beautiful lie now that his eyes had witnessed what reality actually contained? But then, as they prepared to turn the chariot back toward the gates, the fourth sight manifested before his awareness. He perceived an individual walking through the busy market court, an old man. Yes, but moving with such an absolute peace, such an innate dignity, and such an evident internal calm that he appeared to emit a quiet radiance from within. His head was cleanly shaved, his garments consisted of nothing more than a simple patch of cloth, and he carried nothing but a small wooden bowl. Yet, his entire presence communicated a quality of absolute freedom that had nothing to do with material wealth, social status, or palace luxury. "Who is that individual?" Siddhartha inquired, feeling an intense, inexplicable pull toward the figure. "That is an ascetic, my lord," Channa explained. "He is an individual who has chosen to step away from the conventional narrative of worldly pursuit, to dedicate his entire focus to investigating the nature of suffering. He seeks to comprehend why conscious beings experience misery, and whether there might be a practical path that leads beyond suffering." In that exact intersection of time, everything crystallized within Siddhartha's consciousness. He had been shown the absolute problem, the inescapable realities of decay, disease, and mortality that touch every single life cycle. And now, he had been shown that a path toward a solution was possible, not a path based on the denial of these realities, and not a strategy of distraction, but an internal understanding so deep that a human being could face the ultimate vulnerabilities of existence with absolute peace. The return journey to the palace gates was wrapped in an absolute silence. Siddhartha looked upon the familiar luxury of his home with completely altered eyes. The exotic flowers were still blooming, but now he held the certain knowledge that they would rot. The music was still sweet, but now he understood it was trying frantically to drown out the sound of time passing. The faces surrounding him were still young, vibrant, and attractive, but now his vision could penetrate through the surface to see the aging, sickness, and death that awaited them all. He could not unsee what his eyes had witnessed. The beautiful cage was no longer beautiful, it was simply a cage, and the quiet questions of his youth had transformed into a roaring demand for truth, the great renunciation. Entering the unknown in the depths of that transformative night, while the great palaces slept in their perfumed quietude, Siddhartha lay awake, staring into the darkness. The golden decorations that had once delighted his vision now appeared as beautiful bars constructed across his consciousness. Every luxury surrounding his frame seemed to whisper the exact same question. How can you continue to participate in this illusion when you know what awaits every single human being outside these walls? The weight of what he had witnessed that day pressed heavily against his chest. Physical decay, disease, and absolute mortality were no longer distant, abstract concepts to be discussed by philosophers. They were revealed to be the hidden, fragile foundation underneath every single moment of his life. Every laugh, every feast, and every sensory pleasure was taking place directly on top of these inevitable realities. but it was the image of the peaceful ascetic that continuously returned to his awareness, that quality of absolute interior freedom, that capacity to be completely at ease with existence exactly as it is. If such a state of peace was truly possible in the face of life's harsh conditions, then there was an entirely separate dimension of reality, to be understood, something that went far beyond both the path of denial and the path of despair. Near the hour of midnight, a definitive resolution stabilized within his heart with an absolute, unshakable clarity. He could not continue to live his life in a state of willful ignorance, no matter how beautifully that ignorance was decorated by his father. Moving with the quiet, deliberate focus of an individual whose mind is completely made up, he rose from his bed. He directed a final, heartbreaking gaze toward his sleeping wife and newborn son, his chest tight with a profound love and the immediate pain of what he was about to execute. This was never a shallow rejection of his family, but a quest that might ultimately serve their liberation and the liberation of all conscious beings. How could he be an authentic husband or a true father if he systematically refused to investigate the most primary conditions of existence? He removed his royal vestments, those fine silk garments that had marked his extreme privilege since the moment of his birth. He laid aside his jeweled crown, the symbol of the worldly power and political responsibility he was renouncing. In their place, he wrapped his frame in a simple piece of unadorned cloth, stepping out into the midnight air. With nothing but an unyielding determination and an unshakable commitment to locating answers, he walked out of the palace gates forever. The contrast was stark, immediate, and absolute, transitioning from the most physically comfortable life imaginable to the complete uncertainty of a wandering seeker without any guarantee of success. Transitioning from being served by hundreds to serving exclusively the deepest calling of his heart, moving from a world where every desire was instantly fulfilled to embracing the complete, trackless unknown. But within that radical simplicity, his awareness discovered a profound sense of liberation. For the first time in his existence, Siddhartha was completely free to investigate the nature of life, without the artificial buffer of luxury, without the distraction of constant pleasure, and without the comfortable lies that wealth could purchase. He was finally standing face to face with existence exactly as it is. He sought out every spiritual master and philosophical authority he could locate across the land. He studied with master meditators who could enter states of consciousness so highly refined that they appeared to touch the divine, and he mastered their techniques with an extraordinary velocity. He joined groups of extreme ascetics who operated under the belief that punishing the physical body would eventually liberate the spiritual mind from its limitations. For 6 long years, he threw his entire life force into every practice, with an absolute, uncompromised dedication. He learned to meditate so deeply that his body could remain completely motionless for hours at a time, his awareness absorbed in states of profound clarity and bliss. But gradually, a deeply troubling pattern revealed itself to his awareness. Every single method he mastered, no matter how profound or mystical it appeared, led exclusively to temporary states of mind, rather than a permanent, unconditioned understanding. The blissful states of meditation would eventually conclude, delivering his awareness back to the exact same fundamental existential questions. The beautiful philosophical systems, while intellectually satisfying, did not touch the core of the restlessness that gnawed at his heart. The extreme practices of physical deprivation weakened his flesh until he resembled a living skeleton, without generating a single ounce of ultimate wisdom. He began to realize that both the extreme indulgence of his palace youth and the extreme denial of his ascetic years were merely 2 sides of the exact same defensive coin. Both strategies were fundamentally forms of running away from the actual immediate experience of being a human being. One ran frantically toward pleasure to escape discomfort, while the other ran frantically from pleasure out of a fear of attachment. Neither approach was willing to sit completely still and investigate what was actually occurring in the direct experience of the present moment. Near the conclusion of his 6th year of searching, physically broken and spiritually exhausted by methodologies that promised everything but delivered only temporary relief, Siddhartha found himself standing at the edge of a river. He was so severely weakened by starvation that his limbs failed him, and he nearly drowned in the current. And within that moment of absolute physical and spiritual collapse, a significant shift in understanding took place. He recognized that he needed to abandon all external formulas and find a completely different approach to reality. He accepted a simple bowl of rice milk offered by a compassionate village woman, nourishing his broken frame back to health. He bathed in the clear waters of the river, washing away the dust, grime, and accumulated stories of his 6 years of frantic seeking. With his physical strength restored, he walked toward a large, majestic fig tree, cleared a space beneath its branches, and sat down upon the bare earth with the deepest, most uncompromised intention his consciousness had ever held. For 6 years, he had hunted everywhere outside himself for the answer to human suffering. Now, he would sit under this tree and look directly into the unmediated nature of his own mind, until he either discovered the truth of existence or died in the absolute attempt. The awakening, waking up from the dream. As the shadow of the mountains lengthened across the valley, on what would become the most significant night in the history of human consciousness, Siddhartha settled into his seat beneath the tree, with a resolve that held no tension. This was never the aggressive determination of an ego, trying one more clever technique, or following one more external authority. It was the quiet, unshakable commitment of a mind that had finally recognized that the answer, if it existed at all, was located nowhere outside the direct, immediate investigation of awareness itself. He had exhausted every avenue of the world: extreme luxury, extreme starvation, advanced psychological manipulation, and dense intellectual philosophy. All of them had delivered nothing more than temporary states. He sat down upon the earth with a silent promise. I will not rise from this spot until I comprehend the nature of suffering and locate the path to its absolute end. As the darkness deepened around his form, Siddhartha turned the light of his attention inward with a quality of pristine, non-judgmental observation that he had never applied before. Instead of attempting to manufacture a special spiritual state, or escape from his immediate sensory data, or achieve an abstract dimension of bliss, he simply began to observe exactly what was occurring within his consciousness in the immediate present. What was the true nature of this mind that was continuously seeking? What was the exact root of that systemic dissatisfaction that no external condition seemed capable of satisfying? He watched his thoughts arise, display their temporary form, and pass away like wispy clouds in a vast, empty sky. He observed desires emerge from the darkness, demand his attention with an intense urgency, and then completely dissolve into nothingness the moment he refused to feed them with his engagement. He noted how his intellect continuously constructed elaborate narratives regarding the past and the future, completely unable to rest within the simple, unadorned reality of what was actually present. But as the hours of the night moved through the forest, his vision began to penetrate through assumptions that had shaped human life for eons. He saw through the false premise that happiness comes from getting what we want. He pierced the deep belief that suffering is an external event that happens to us, rather than an internal layer we actively add to our experience. And he saw through the illusion that there is a solid, separate, and permanent self that experiences reality, recognizing instead that there is simply experience flowing continuously through the open sky of awareness. As the stars transitioned across the heavens, layers of cognitive misunderstanding fell away from his consciousness like old garments. The hidden mechanism of human suffering became as clear as daylight to his awareness. The way craving generates a permanent state of dissatisfaction. The way our tight attachment to inherently impermanent things guarantees an eventual disappointment. And the way our continuous seeking for a better moment completely prevents us from appreciating the absolute completeness of what already is. And then, as the first morning star ascended on the eastern horizon, an extraordinary event occurred. It was not a mystical trance, a supernatural visitation, or a cosmic explosion. It was the simplest, most profound, and most obvious recognition possible to consciousness: the absolute cessation of the seeking mechanism itself. The inner argument with reality that had driven his entire existence simply ran out of energy. The internal friction collapsed. In that moment of clear seeing, Siddhartha became the Buddha, The title simply signifies the awakened one, an individual who has completely woken up from the collective dream of separation, the dream of inadequacy, and the false paradigm that peace is located anywhere other than in the clear perception of what is actually present. He had discovered a reality that completely redefines the nature of human contentment, not a new philosophy, dogma, or belief system, but a direct resting in consciousness when it is no longer caught in the endless, exhausting loop of wanting things to be different than they are. For 7 days, he remained seated beneath the shade of that tree, completely integrating this profound shift in baseline understanding. When he finally stood up and stepped back into the world of human activity, he carried within his being a practical, walkable path that any human being could follow toward the exact same state of absolute interior freedom. What he discovered regarding the nature of our restlessness, the possibility of its complete end, and the simple shifts in perspective that make this freedom accessible to you tonight, is preparing to completely redefine everything you think you know about what it means to be truly happy. The four verities. Facing reality with open hands. The framework that the Buddha shared with the world after his awakening was never a pessimistic or depressing condemnation of human life. It was a statement of absolute honesty regarding our psychological condition. His first insight acknowledged a reality that we all recognize within our hearts, but spend much of our lives attempting to avoid through distraction. The structural truth of dukkha, the reality that conditioned life contains an inherent layer of unsatisfactoriness. This is not merely the dramatic, acute suffering we witness during times of major crisis. It includes the obvious parameters: aging, physical sickness, mortality, the pain of being separated from those we love, and the frustration of failing to get what we want. But dukkha includes something far more subtle, pervasive, and tender. Even our most ecstatic, joyful moments carry a quiet, internal ache. The sunset is magnificently beautiful, but it is continuously setting before our eyes. The celebration is wonderful, but the hours are drifting toward the conclusion. The romantic connection brings immense joy, but absolutely nothing remains identical to itself forever. There is a bittersweet, fragile quality to even our most precious human experiences, because we hold the intuitive knowledge that they are inherently impermanent. Conditioned existence carries a fundamental friction. It is identical to the act of trying to find an absolute physical comfort while sitting upon a chair that is slightly too hard or slightly too soft. You can continuously adjust your posture. You can add soft cushions, or you can switch chairs entirely. But there remains always a subtle baseline of something being just a little bit off. The Buddha was never asking us to become cynical or depressed about our lives. He was inviting us to become completely realistic about them. He was encouraging us to stop pretending that if we just arrange our external environment with enough precision, we will eventually secure a permanent state of satisfaction. This structural recognition is immensely liberating for your awareness tonight, because it stops you from taking your personal restlessness so personally. It reminds your system that you do not need to fix your core identity to feel complete. The dissatisfaction is simply a feature of trying to find permanence within a world constructed entirely of impermanent materials. When you accept that a baseline of change and uncertainty is woven into the very matrix of existence, you can completely abandon the exhausting project of trying to force an unstable universe to become stable. You stop fighting the weather of reality and start learning how to flow within its currents. But here is the location where the Buddha's framework becomes truly revolutionary for your life. The unavoidable difficulties of existence, physical realities of aging, loss, and uncertainty constitute only a minuscule fraction of our total psychological suffering. The vast majority of our anguish is generated not by what happens to our lives, but by how our minds relate to what happens. His second verity revealed that we create immense towers of unnecessary suffering through the mechanism of tanha, which literally translates as thirst or compulsive craving. This is not the healthy, natural preference for comfort or nutrition. It is the desperate, addictive quality of wanting that convinces your awareness that your fundamental value and well-being depend entirely on getting or avoiding a specific experience. There are three distinct expressions of this systemic thirst: that you can observe within your own thoughts. The first is kamatadh, craving for pleasant sensory experiences, the persistent illusion that the correct sequence of sights, tastes, sounds, and physical sensations will finally satisfy the void inside. The second is bhavatanhath, craving for becoming, the restless drive to transform yourself into someone special, to achieve the next status marker, to matter to the world, and to continuously become more than what you currently are in the present moment. The third is vibhavanhath, craving for non-existence or absolute escape, the desperate desire to push away what you are currently feeling, to annihilate discomfort, and to completely anesthetize your awareness to the raw texture of reality. Observe how deeply exhausting this internal configuration is. Your awareness is placed in a condition of permanent locomotion, constantly grasping forward toward what it desires, frantically pushing away what it fears, and continuously trying to become something separate from what is actually present. It is like being caught inside an internal psychological storm that never grants your nervous system a moment of rest. But see the deep love hidden within this realization. None of this craving makes you a bad or flawed individual. It is the most natural, logical response of a system that feels unsafe or incomplete. We reach for pleasure because it temporarily soothes the ache of our isolation. We strive to become more, because we hope it will finally protect our worth we try to escape, because current reality feels entirely unbearable to hold. The structural problem is not that your system generates these responses. The problem is that they are entirely incapable of resolving the underlying systemic issue. They operate exactly like a powerful painkiller administered to a broken bone. The medication delivers a temporary illusion of relief, but it does absolutely nothing to align or heal the skeletal structure beneath the flesh. In fact, these compulsive cycles often amplify your suffering by reinforcing the false belief that your internal peace is a hostage to external conditions. This insight is never asking you to abandon your preferences or stop caring about your life. It is revealing that the moment your preferences transform into absolute demands, the moment your hopes freeze into attachments, that is the exact intersection where you actively construct suffering on top of clean pain. And this brings our exploration to the great verity of Hope's third realization, which announces that the psychological suffering we create through craving and attachment is never a permanent or inevitable feature of the human design. It can end completely. This freedom is not about transforming yourself into a cold, emotionally numb stone, or becoming detached from the beauty of human life. It is about discovering a way of interacting with your experience that completely eliminates the internal friction we have grown up mistaking for normal life. Imagine what it would feel like to want things in this world without that desperate, anxious edge of need, to care deeply about your creative projects without the accompanying status anxiety, to love another human being completely without the fear of loss dominating the love itself. The Buddha defined this state of absolute relief as nirvana, which literally signifies the act of cooling down or extinguishing a fire. What gets cooled down within your system is not your capacity to feel, to engage, or to love. What is extinguished are the fires of greed, hostility, and delusion that keep your awareness trapped in cycles of dissatisfaction. This relief is not a distant reward reserved exclusively for unique individuals. It is the natural, inevitable result of clearly seeing how suffering is constructed in this moment, and simply making the conscious choice to stop constructing it that way. It is identical to learning that you have been accidentally leaning your bare hand against a hot iron stove, and then simply lifting your hand away from the heat. The resulting relief is not a skill you must practice, or an achievement you must earn. It is what naturally remains when you stop executing the action that was causing the injury. The individuals who have touched this space of freedom describe it as an unshakable stability that remains constant, regardless of what weather passes through the environment. A deep contentment that is entirely unbothered by getting or not getting what the ego wants, and an engagement with life that is fully present, yet completely free from attachment. It is the realization that the sky of your essential consciousness was always completely peaceful, spacious, and clear you had simply spent your entire life focusing so intensely on the turbulent weather moving through the sky that you had completely forgotten the sky itself is never altered by the storm. This freedom is available to your awareness in this dark room, not through the acquisition of something new, but through the radical release of what has never served your peace. The Noble Eightfold Path, the integrated matrix of freedom. To make this discovery an immediate reality, the Buddha mapped out a highly structured, walkable path composed of 8 interconnected dimensions of daily life. This is the Noble Eightfold Path, not a linear sequence of stairs where you master one step before moving to the next, but an integrated wheel of training where all 8 factors operate simultaneously, supporting and reinforcing one another like the spokes of a wheel moving you forward into freedom. The path addresses the entirety of your human existence. How you perceive reality, what motivates your choices, how you communicate with your community, how you execute actions, how you secure your sustenance, how you direct your mental energy, how you maintain your attention, and how you cultivate an inner stillness. What makes this matrix so exceptionally beautiful is its absolute practicality. You are never required to believe a specific dogma, adopt an exotic culture, or alter your life circumstances to begin walking it. You can begin exactly where your physical frame is resting right now. The Buddha referred to this framework as the middle way because it systematically avoids the extremes of human conditioning. It bypasses the path of total sensory indulgence that attempts to solve internal emptiness through consumerism and pleasure, and it bypasses the path of absolute denial that attempts to achieve freedom through self-punishment and suppression. Instead, it offers a highly balanced, intelligent approach that addresses the root causes of our restlessness through wisdom, compassion, and continuous practice. It is about gradually training your heart and mind in ways that naturally reduce the cross-generation of unnecessary suffering. Like the process of mastering any complex human skill, it requires patience, consistency, and a great gentleness with your own limitations. But unlike other worldly skills, every single step you take along this path delivers an immediate, tangible benefit to your system: a little more space between thoughts, a little more clarity in your relationships, and a deeper baseline of genuine contentment with your life exactly as it presents itself. Let us explore how these 8 factors function as real supports for your consciousness as you rest within this night. Movement. Clear vision and aligned motive. The initial dimension of this matrix of freedom begins with the cultivation of clear vision, known traditionally as right view. This has absolutely nothing to do with adopting a set of correct religious opinions or subscribing to a rigid code of belief. It is the development of an unmediated capacity to see the phenomena of your life exactly as they are in reality, rather than through the distorted lens of your personal hopes, fears, and social conditioning. Clear vision begins with the direct observation of the 3 universal characteristics that govern all manifest existence. The primary characteristic is impermanence law of anicca, the truth that absolutely everything in the universe is in a constant state of fluid transition. This is never an abstract philosophy to comprehend intellectually. It is an immediate lived reality to be noticed moment by moment within your room. Your thoughts are continuously shifting their shape. Your internal emotions are moving, like weather currents. Your physical body is in a state of subtle cellular motion. Even your structural sense of identity transforms multiple times throughout a single day. Suffering is generated exclusively when we resist this fundamental truth, attempting to freeze a reality that is naturally designed to flow. Clear vision cleans the lens of your perception, allowing you to see the distance between what is actually occurring and the elaborate stories your intellect constructs about what is occurring, creating the necessary space for a deep wisdom to stabilize within your heart. This clarity of vision naturally informs the second spoke of the wheel-aligned motive, known traditionally as right intention. This is the compass of your heart, the underlying orientation that guides your choices and actions across the earth. Aligned motive is not about achieving an impossible state of psychological purity. In every moment, it is the gradual, consistent alignment of your deepest desires with what actually promotes freedom and universal well-being. The framework points toward three specific orientations of intent that support your peace: the motive of release, the motive of benevolence, and the motive of harmlessness. The motive of release is the profound willingness to let go of what causes suffering, even when those habits are intensely familiar, comfortable, or validated by your culture. It is the conscious choice to release the compulsive need to check your digital devices for validation, or to abandon the habit of complaining about conditions you cannot alter. It is choosing the open space of freedom over the comfortable, decorated prison of your old behavioral loops. It means becoming deeply conscious regarding what truly nourishes your spirit versus what merely provides a temporary escape or distraction from reality. Movement new, skillful communication and conscious conduct. The internal alignment of your vision and motive naturally expresses itself through your external interactions with the world, beginning with skillful communication, known traditionally as right speech. This is the practice of utilizing your words in ways that heal rather than wound, that connect human beings rather than divide communities, and that serve the truth rather than the preservation of the ego. Skillful communication means developing an acute sensitivity to the weight and impact of your language, recognizing that words are forms of energy that ripple out across the collective consciousness. It involves abstaining from clear distortions of the truth, avoiding language that creates unnecessary conflict or separation between people, and refraining from the subtle violence of sarcasm or harsh commentary. In our high-speed digital age, this practice extends far beyond the face-to-face conversation. It governs every text message you compose, every email you transmit, and every online comment you leave behind before releasing a word into the world. Skillful communication invites your awareness to ask three gentle questions. Is it true? Is it helpful to the situation? Is it delivered with kindness? These three inquiries hold the capacity to completely transform your relationships and your inner sense of structural integrity. This communication of integrity naturally flows into conscious conduct, known traditionally as right action. This is the practice of living your daily life in structural alignment with your deepest values, of making physical choices that actively promote well-being and avoid causing unnecessary harm to any living entity. It is based on a deep, experiential recognition of the absolute interconnectedness of all life, understanding that your personal well-being and the well-being of others are not separate phenomena, and that causing harm to another is as completely senseless as reaching down and hitting your own foot with a hammer. Conscious conduct provides a set of protective guidelines for the soul, preserving life with compassion, practicing an absolute honesty in all material dealings, and bringing a deep respect and consideration to your physical intimacy. It is about bringing the exact same presence and high consciousness to your somatic choices that you bring to your quietest moments of meditation. The exceptional gift of conscious conduct is the immediate sense of inner cleanliness and self-respect it generates within your nervous system. When you know with absolute certainty that your external actions align perfectly with your internal values, a natural confidence and an unshakable peace stabilize within your being. Movement the harmonious sustenance and balanced momentum. The ethical alignment of your actions extends naturally into how you secure your material place in the world. This is harmonious sustenance, known traditionally as right livelihood. This is the practice of making your living in ways that do not depend on exploitation, deception, or the generation of suffering for other conscious beings. But it goes far deeper than simply avoiding harmful industries. It is the conscious art of transforming your daily professional labor into a direct expression of your spiritual values. Any human occupation, whether you are constructing houses with structural integrity, administering medical care with compassion, managing a business with fairness, or sweeping a floor with care, can transform into harmonious sustenance the moment it is approached with the intent to serve the collective whole. It is about moving through your professional life with a sense of sufficiency and gratitude rather than entitlement and greed, recognizing that your daily work is your primary vehicle for contributing your unique energy to the ongoing evolution of the world. To sustain this ethical configuration without falling into exhaustion, you require balanced momentum. known traditionally as right effort. This is the art of gentle persistency cultivation of a mental energy that is sustainable across your entire lifespan, because it works in harmony with your natural wisdom rather than trying to muscle its way to transformation. Balanced momentum is about learning how to skillfully manage the garden of your mind-exerting energy to prevent negative, unwholesome states from taking root, releasing difficult emotions that have already arisen without suppression, cultivating beneficial qualities like gratitude and presence, and protecting those moments of natural well-being that manifest spontaneously within your awareness. It is about locating the perfect middle way between the extreme of psychological laziness, where you remain passive and locked within old reactive loops, and the extreme of overstriving, where you create tension, anxiety, and eventual burnout by trying to force your consciousness to transform overnight. Balanced momentum resembles the act of tuning a delicate stringed instrument. If you pull the string too tight, it will instantly snap under the tension. If you leave it too loose, it will never produce a meaningful note. You look for that exact balance point where the effort feels light, natural, sustainable, and entirely full of joy. Movement I've continuous presence and stabilized awareness. The culmination of the path leads your attention directly into the interior architecture of the mind, beginning with continuous presence, known traditionally as right mindfulness. This is the transformative practice of systematically waking up to the actual experience of your life as it unfolds in the present moment, rather than remaining lost within the abstract movies of your thoughts. Continuous presence involves establishing a clear, non-reactive meta-awareness across 4 distinct dimensions of your immediate reality. You practice mindfulness of the physical body, becoming intensely aware of somatic sensations, the texture of your posture, and the immediate movement of your breath, without trying to fix or alter anything. Simply returning attention to the body as a natural anchor for the present moment. You practice mindfulness of your feeling tones, noticing whether each passing experience carries a pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral coloring, allowing you to catch your automatic loops of grasping or resistance before they transform into full-blown emotional storms. You cultivate mindfulness of your changing mind states, observing the movements of anxiety, joy, anger, or confusion as temporary weather patterns passing through the wide sky of your awareness. And you practice mindfulness of the operational laws of the mind, understanding directly what choices generate contraction and what choices create absolute freedom for your spirit. This continuous return to presence naturally concentrates your mental energy into stabilized awareness, known traditionally as right concentration. This is the development of a mind that is both deeply peaceful and sharply clear, a quality of psychological stability that can meet any life experience with an absolute unfluctuating equanimity. It is the practice of training your attention to rest entirely upon a single focus, such as the natural flow of your breath, and gently, patiently returning the attention to that focus every single time it wanders away into narrative distraction. This is identical to the process of strengthening a physical muscle through consistent, gentle repetition. Each time you notice your mind has drifted into an anxious loop regarding tomorrow, and you choose to gracefully guide the attention back to the physical sensation of your current breath, you are directly rewiring the neural circuitry of your brain. Over time, this stabilized awareness reveals an interior resource of peace that remains completely unaffected by external conditions. You discover that you are no longer a hostage to the changing circumstances of your life. You are the vast, unconditioned space within which the entire universe arises, displays its beauty, and returns to stillness, the living matrix. Stories of modern realization. When you observe these 8 factors of the path with clarity, you perceive that they are never separate disciplines you must frantically balance within your thoughts. They function as a single, beautifully integrated matrix of freedom. Practicing any single spoke of this wheel naturally mobilizes and strengthens all the others. Consider how this transformation manifests within the infrastructure of an ordinary human life in our contemporary era. There was a healthcare worker laboring within the high-pressure environment of a chaotic urban emergency department. Her daily shifts were defined by intense stress, unpredictable crises, and the constant presence of human suffering. She began her practice by simply dedicating 10 minutes of her morning routine to the cultivation of stabilized awareness, focusing entirely on her breathing before entering the hospital. As her mind discovered a baseline of internal calm through this practice, her capacity for skillful communication began to alter naturally. When Sato fronted by highly difficult reactive patients in the triage room, she found herself responding from a place of absolute presence and clear boundary setting, rather than matching their emotional velocity with her own frustration. This shift in her speech naturally transformed her professional labor into an authentic expression of harmonious sustenance. She was no longer just managing clinical crises. To complete a shift, she was utilizing her presence as a direct support for healing within a chaotic environment. Her patients began to intuitively register her stabilizing energy, calming their own accelerated nervous systems in her presence. Her professional colleagues sought out her collaboration during moments of extreme department stress because her clarity remained unmoved by the surrounding noise. She had not altered a single parameter of her external employment. She had completely transformed the internal consciousness that inhabited the employment. Consider the reality of a parent navigating the intense demands of raising young children while managing a household. He frequently found himself reacting with sharp flashes of anger when his children refused to cooperate, creating a heavy atmosphere of tension in the home that left him feeling filled with guilt each night. He made the conscious choice to implement continuous presence into his daily life, training his awareness to notice the specific physical sensations of tightness that manifested in his chest. The exact microsecond frustration began to build within his system. This physical somatic awareness created a critical window of space before an emotional reaction could escape his mouth. Within that precious space, he mobilized aligned motive, choosing the path of patience and clear guidance over the path of a reactive explosion. He began to speak to his children from a space of absolute clarity and loving firmness. The children, mirroring his altered nervous system, began to shift their own behavior, moving away from defensive power struggles into a state of genuine cooperation. He had systematically broken a cross-generation cycle of emotional reactivity within his family, demonstrating that the path benefits not just your individual peace, but the psychological safety of those who share your life. Think of an educator working within a modern classroom, frequently overwhelmed by the bureaucratic requirements and the systemic pressures of the school system. She began to apply clear vision to her environment, intentionally choosing to look past the surface labels of her most disruptive, difficult students to see them as young consciousnesses actively struggling with their own hidden layers of suffering. This single perspective altered her entire methodology from an exercise in aggressive control to a practice of deep compassion. She brought balanced momentum to her daily lesson planning, choosing to prioritize authentic human connection and engagement over the frantic optimization of metrics. Her classroom transformed into a living sanctuary where young minds felt deeply seen, safe, and valued for who they intrinsically were. The academic outcomes improved naturally, but the truer achievement was the emotional regulation and the sense of completeness that blossomed within her students. She had transformed her daily work into her primary matrix of awakening, proving that there is absolutely no boundary line separating your spiritual development from the immediate reality of your daily activities. The unconditional peace, resting within imperfection. When the human mind begins to step along this ancient path of freedom, the conventional illusion that we must transform ourselves into flawless, unmoving statues of perfection is completely stripped away. What alters through this practice is never the messy, unpredictable content of your human life. What transforms is your baseline relationship to that content. You continue to experience the full, beautiful range of human emotions. You continue to face difficult professional and personal challenges, and you continue to encounter ordinary human setbacks, but you hold all of it within a completely separate context. You discover an immense quality of open space surrounding your immediate experiences. An intense emotion may arise within your chest, but it no longer possesses the capacity to sweep your entire identity away into its drama. A destructive thought may cross your mind, but you recognize it simply as a passing cloud, refusing to validate its authority. It is identical to the experience of living your entire life inside a cramped, suffocating room, and suddenly discovering that the structure contains wide windows and open doors that look out upon an infinite horizon. The room has not magically altered its dimensions, but it has completely lost its capacity to confine your spirit. In your relationships, this internal space generates a profound baseline of safety and authentic intimacy. When your awareness is no longer consumed by the frantic defense of a fragile, insecure ego narrative, you develop the rare capacity to truly listen to another human being speak, hearing their actual needs rather than formulating your next intellectual rebuttal. When you are no longer looked to others to fill an internal void of worthlessness, you are finally free to offer them a genuine, uncalculated care that holds no hidden agendas. You stop taking the behavioral missteps of others as a personal indictment of your value, responding to conflict with a gentle curiosity rather than an explosive reactivity. Your relationship to your own human imperfections undergoes the most radical transformation of all. You will still make mistakes on this path. You will still experience days defined by frustration, and you will still occasionally react from old, conditioned habits of fear and pride. But these human shortfalls no longer possess the power to devastate your self-worth. They are no longer interpreted as indictments of your character. They are met simply as practical feedback information that reveals exactly where your awareness was temporarily asleep. Invitations to return to the path with an even deeper self-compassion. This acceptance of your raw, unfiltered humanity is the exact mechanism that unlocks your capacity for authentic growth. When you are no longer expending your limited life force, fighting the reality of your current standing, or defending an illusion of perfection to the world, that energy becomes fully available for the cultivation of a deep wisdom and a spontaneous love. You discover an interior peace that does not require the absolute absence of difficulty to exist, a profound, unshakable stillness that lives directly in the absolute center of the storm, the awakening of the night, the living practice. If your awareness is still resting within this quiet transmission, a beautiful transformation has already begun to shift the internal landscape of your mind. You have recognized the universal baseline of our collective restlessness. You have seen through the beautiful, well-intentioned trap of chasing an emotional destination, and you have glimpsed the practical map of an authentic interior freedom. Now, you stand at the most beautiful threshold of the journey, the intersection, where ancient wisdom transforms into your direct, living practice. You are never required to alter your entire life circumstances tomorrow morning to step upon this path. You do not need to become a different person, or purge your mind of every difficult thought, or achieve an exotic state of consciousness to be entirely worthy of walking this path of freedom. You can begin exactly where your body is resting within this room tonight, utilizing whatever limited time and energy you actually possess. The most practical entry point into the matrix is always the simplest one. Select one solitary factor of the Eightfold Path that speaks to your heart with the greatest clarity right now, and make the conscious choice to bring it into your immediate reality. Perhaps you choose the spoke of continuous presence, committing to set aside just 5 minutes of your morning to sit completely still and observe the physical sensations of your breathing, not trying to achieve an abstract state of enlightenment, not forcing your mind to stop its thinking, simply practicing the gentle art of returning your attention to the breath. Every time you note that your mind has drifted away into a story, or perhaps you feel called to practice skillful communication, implementing a conscious pause before you release a text message or speak a phrase, asking your heart if the words are kind, true, and useful to the situation. This single intervention holds the capacity to completely rewire your relationship dynamics. Please, as you step along this path, maintain an absolute, unwavering gentleness with your own human system. This matrix of freedom is never a competitive test you must pass. It is a gentle training designed to reduce the friction of your life. There will be days when your meditation feels entirely chaotic, when you fall back into old patterns of sharp reactivity, and when the distance between your high spiritual aspirations and your immediate behavior feels immensely discouraging. These moments are never evidence that you are failing at the path, or that the framework is non-functional. They are simply part of the natural process of rewiring a human mind. What matters is never the illusion of a flawless performance. What counts is simply the gentle persistence of returning to the path. Each time you note that your awareness has been captured by an anxious loop regarding the future, and you make the soft choice to guide your focus back to the present moment, you are executing an act of monumental spiritual development. Each time you respond to your own behavioral errors with a deep, forgiving self-compassion rather than a violent self-criticism, you are directly embodying the exact wisdom that the path is engineered to cultivate within your soul. You are never walking this path of inquiry in isolation. Across the face of the earth tonight, millions of conscious beings are exploring these exact same insights, facing these identical internal struggles, and discovering these exact same dimensions of freedom. You are part of a vast, invisible community of practitioners that spans across languages, boundaries, and centuries of human history. Every single time you choose presence over distraction, kindness over hostility, and understanding over judgment, you are directly injecting a stabilizing clarity into the wider collective network of our species. The Buddha's final transmission to his companions before his form dissolved was a simple, powerful command: be a lamp unto your own awareness. He was never encouraging a selfish isolation. He was revealing the truth that the ultimate wisdom you are hunting across the earth is already fully present directly within the unmediated texture of your own lived experience. No book, no master, and no external formula can ever hand you something that you do not already possess within your core. They can only function as fingers pointing your awareness toward the unconditioned freedom that has been your birthright since the moment of your creation. Your actual daily life is your primary, highest teacher-ivery complex professional challenge is an invitation to practice balanced momentum. Every relational friction is an opportunity to cultivate aligned motive, and every ordinary breath is a direct doorway into the unconditioned peace of the present moment. Your task is never to transform your identity into a historical copy of the Buddha. Your solitary assignment is simply to be the most conscious, present, and compassionate version of yourself that you can possibly manage to be in this immediate moment. Remember that quiet question we began our journey with, that 3 a.m. voice whispering into the tightness of your chest. Is this really all there is to my life? As you consistently walk this integrated path, a magnificent transformation happens to that exact question. It does not vanish from your mind, but its emotional chemistry changes completely. Instead of arising from a space of deep anxiety, acute lack, and painful dissatisfaction, it begins to emerge from an open horizon of profound curiosity, wonder, and cosmic celebration. Is this all there is? Transforms into a soft invitation to look deeper into the staggering miracle of the immediate moment. It becomes an absolute celebration of the simple fact that your consciousness is currently alive, aware, and capable of experiencing reality, the truth that you can perceive colors, hear sounds, offer love, and make the conscious choice to step out of the loop of reactivity. The inquiry shifts its architecture from why is life failing to give me more, to how can I give more of my presence to this life, from when will I finally secure happiness, to how can I embody peace for this world right now. And within that quiet space, whether at 3 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a profound recognition stabilizes within your cells. This immediate moment is entirely, unconditionally enough, not because your external life has suddenly become absolutely perfect, or because all your worldly problems have magically evaporated from existence, but because you have finally discovered a dimension of your being that does not depend on perfection or solutions to be completely whole. You have returned to the unmoving sky of your awareness. You have finally come home to yourself, and from that homecoming, an infinite grace becomes your natural mode of being on this earth. The path to an unshakable freedom is open before your awareness right now. All you need to do is release your grip, breathe out, and begin the living symphony of integration. As your awareness allows these insights to settle into your consciousness, feel the profound weightlessness that manifests when you stop trying to manage the universe. The 15 traditional journeys of our early exploration and the structured matrix of this path are not separate concepts you must organize. They are all various streams flowing effortlessly into the exact same ocean of absolute interior quietude. They are the footprints left behind by generations of seekers who discovered that the home we are hunting for across the earth is the exact awareness that is conducting the hunt. You are the deep basin of water holding the capacity to accommodate the movements of the sky, while your dark depths remain entirely undisturbed by the surface wind. You are the flexible river bamboo yielding gracefully to the immense storms of circumstance, bending low to the earth without ever losing your deep structural roots, rising whole and intact when the gale has passed through the valley. You are the empty ceramic cup possessing the sacred space required to truly taste the fresh water of each unique moment, without your past definitions contaminating the flavor. You are the resonance of the single hand, the profound, unconditioned background of silence that holds the entire symphony of your life together. You are the old farmer maintaining a steady patience with the unfolding narrative of your life, refusing to label temporary chapters as absolute tragedies, resting in the absolute freedom of not needing to be certain. You are the practitioner who has gracefully laid their bow down upon the earth, systematically refusing to shoot the second arrow of suffering into a clean human wound. You are the tea ceremony unfolding right now, within the infrastructure of your physical frame, resting completely where your body is resting, doing exactly what your breath is executing, whole and undivided in the darkness. You are the unbroken moon hanging pristine in the high sky, entirely untouched by the distorted reflections and the anxious projections of your mind's pond. You are the silent tower preserving the world through your absolute stillness, providing a safe harbor of quietude where an overstimulated world can finally rest its weariness. You are the unmanned vessel drifting down the lake free from the heavy burden of personal blame, recognizing that those who hurt your heart were simply drifting blind within the mist of their own unexamined pain. You are the master's silencer revealing the uncreated completeness that already lives beneath the noise of your thoughts. You are the crimson seed gathered from the human family, connected by an invisible thread of shared vulnerability to every soul that has ever loved, lost, and possessed the courage to live authentically on this earth. You are the stonecutter who has completed the vast circle of worldly ambition, only to return to center with the profound realization that ultimate power lives exclusively within the simplicity of your own true nature. You are the lines upon the white sand draped with an absolute love by the passage of time. Beautiful because you are temporary, perfect because you are a continuous practice of renewal. You are the flower held gently in the master's hand. You always have been, and you always will be, even in those moments when your life force feels intensely lost, exhausted, or disconnected from the light. The pristine lotus of your true nature continues to bloom within the deep space of your being, patient, present, and absolutely perfect exactly as it is in this midnight hour. You do not need to perform another action to earn this peace. You do not need to acquire a new attribute to be worthy of this rest. Grant yourself the absolute permission to dissolve into this sacred quietude tonight. Let your analytical intellect go completely offline, knowing that the intelligence that directs your heartbeat and manages your breathing requires absolutely none of your control to sustain your life. You are not an isolated fragment wandering through a hostile universe. You are the very space within which the universe is actively experiencing its own beauty. Rest now, dear friend, deep within the sanctuary of this velvet dark. You are profoundly loved, you are completely safe, and you are forever and always exactly as you are, entirely enough. Welcome home to the stillness that never left your side. This is the path, this is the truth, and this is your absolute blessing.